Needed some space to find myself again. I stared at Madison's Instagram post for exactly 30 seconds, reading those perfectly calculated words over and over until the devastating irony became crystal clear, and then I knew exactly what I had to do to respond to her public ultimatum. We'd been dating for 18 months, sharing a decent two-bedroom apartment in Scottsdale with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the desert mountains and cacti gardens, and I genuinely thought we were building something real and meaningful together in Phoenix's vibrant arts and photography scene where we'd met countless creative professionals who seemed to admire our partnership. But apparently she needed to announce our relationship status to the entire world through a carefully orchestrated social media performance instead of having an actual adult conversation with me about whatever deep-seated insecurities or commitment fears were bothering her or making her question our shared future together. The photo showed her at some impossibly trendy rooftop bar in downtown Phoenix, one of those pretentious places with $25 craft cocktails served in mason jars and a 3-week waiting list for weekend reservations, surrounded by her carefully curated group of status-obsessed girlfriends who always seemed more interested in getting the perfect Instagram shot with ideal lighting than actually enjoying the moment or having genuine conversations about their lives and relationships. Her caption was pure Madison at her most performative and attention-seeking, complete with butterfly and sparkle emojis about feeling free and excited for new adventures and finally embracing her authentic self after being supposedly held back. The kind of manufactured independence declaration that made my stomach turn with recognition because I knew exactly what psychological manipulation game she was playing and how she expected me to respond with immediate panic and desperate attempts to win her back. I'd spent the previous night sitting on our expensive cream-colored sectional couch that we'd picked out together at a furniture store in Tempe, listening to her dramatic ultimatum about needing space to figure out her life path and find herself again after 18 months of apparently being completely lost in our relationship and unable to grow as an individual, thinking like a rational adult that we'd work through whatever quarter-life identity crisis or commitment phobia was bothering her. The way mature people do when they actually care about each other and want to build something lasting rather than running away at the first sign of real emotional intimacy, but this public declaration with strategic hashtags and calculated vulnerability told me everything I needed to know about her true priorities, her emotional maturity level, and exactly how much our year and a half of shared experiences, inside jokes, weekend adventures, and quiet evenings planning our future had actually meant to her beyond Instagram content opportunities and social status elevation among her friend group. Instead of calling or texting frantically to ask what the hell was happening or begging her to reconsider this nuclear option like she probably expected based on her previous successful manipulation tactics throughout our relationship, I calmly grabbed my phone from the granite kitchen counter and took a deliberate, well-composed photo of a silver house key resting in Gabriella's perfectly manicured hand with subtle nail art, the same elegant and unmistakably creative hand that had been helping me carefully organize my vintage camera equipment collection and rare vinyl records just minutes before Madison's attention-seeking post appeared on my Instagram feed like a neon billboard announcing her true character and revealing her complete lack of respect for what we'd built together. Gabriella was this incredibly talented freelance architectural photographer specializing in urban decay and desert landscapes who I'd met at an intimate gallery opening featuring local artists in downtown Phoenix just 2 weeks earlier. Someone who actually understood and genuinely appreciated my passion for capturing authentic moments and creating meaningful visual storytelling instead of performing fake happiness and manufacturing relationship drama for social media validation and meaningless likes from virtual strangers who didn't know or care about the real story behind the carefully filtered images. I posted the photo with a simple but strategically pointed caption about new beginnings hitting completely different when you're finally with the right person who shares your values and creative vision, then deliberately commented on Madison's attention-seeking post with just 2 carefully chosen words and a key emoji that would send exactly the message I intended without dignifying her performance with a paragraph of explanation or giving her the emotional reaction she was clearly fishing for. With her public ultimatum, within minutes my phone started buzzing relentlessly with call after call from Madison's number, each one automatically going straight to the archive folder since I'd already muted her notifications months ago during our increasingly frequent rocky relationship phases when she'd manufacture drama out of nothing and create artificial crises just to test whether I'd chase after her and prove my devotion through panic and desperate reassurance. I watched with growing calm satisfaction as the missed call count climbed steadily to 47 over the next 2 hours while Gabriella and I continued planning our exciting weekend photography expedition to document some fascinating abandoned mining buildings and untouched desert landscapes in the remote Sonoran Desert near Tucson, completely unbothered by the digital tantrum and emotional meltdown happening silently in my archive folder as Madison presumably realized her dramatic gesture. And public relationship ultimatum hadn't gone according to her carefully planned script designed to make me grovel. While Madison frantically drove across Phoenix toward our Scottsdale apartment complex in her white BMW that she could barely afford on her marketing coordinator salary at a struggling digital agency, Gabriella and I were already 3 hours deep into systematically packing my entire life into carefully labeled boxes and loading them into her spacious SUV with the kind of efficiency that comes from shared purpose and mutual respect. I'd called in sick to work that morning for the first time in over a year, something I never did because I took pride in my reliability and professional reputation, but this felt like the most important project I'd ever undertaken, and Gabriella approached it with the same methodical precision and artistic eye she brought to her architectural photography shoots throughout Arizona and New Mexico. She efficiently organized my expensive camera equipment by lens type and vintage year, lovingly wrapped my carefully curated vinyl collection in bubble wrap while discussing the artistic merit of each album cover and the stories behind my favorite finds from local record shops, and helped me disassemble my elaborate home office setup that I'd spent 2 years and several $1,000s perfecting for freelance video editing work during evenings and weekends. The whole process felt surprisingly therapeutic and liberating, like finally cleaning out a cluttered closet that had been stuffed with emotional baggage and painful memories for months. And I realized with each box we carried to her vehicle how much lighter and more optimistic I felt about the future for the first time since Madison and I had started having our increasingly frequent fights about commitment and life direction. We deliberately left Madison's spare key to the apartment, her parking garage remote control, and a printed screenshot of her Instagram post on the granite kitchen counter next to the coffee maker we'd bought together, along with a handwritten note on my personal stationery that simply read thanks for making the decision easy in my neat handwriting, because I wanted her to understand that her public declaration had been received exactly as intended and that I wasn't going to pretend this was some kind of misunderstanding or temporary emotional outburst that we could work through with a long conversation and promises to change. Madison arrived at the complex around 2 in the afternoon, probably expecting to find me devastated and ready to grovel for forgiveness, only to discover our shared apartment systematically stripped of my presence and half empty in a way that made it clear this wasn't a dramatic gesture but a permanent life change. Her expensive designer shoes clicked frantically across the hardwood floors as she surveyed the methodical removal of my belongings from the space we'd decorated together over 18 months of what I genuinely thought was building a foundation for marriage and family, the walls now showing pale rectangles where my framed photography had hung and the entertainment center looking abandoned without my sound system and record player. I later learned from neighbors who found her behavior disturbing that she immediately started banging on doors throughout the building like some kind of unhinged detective, demanding to know if anyone had seen some woman helping me move while providing a surprisingly detailed description of Gabriella considering she'd only glimpsed her in a single carefully cropped Instagram photo. All while I was already 40 miles away heading toward a completely new life that didn't revolve around constantly managing someone else's emotional instability and manufactured drama. By the time Madison was interrogating our elderly neighbors and probably violating several apartment complex policies about harassment, I'd already methodically deactivated my Facebook and Twitter accounts, changed my Netflix password along with every other shared streaming service, canceled my half of our joint Spotify premium subscription, and blocked her phone number on everything except Instagram, where I deliberately left our connection active specifically so she could witness in real time that I was moving forward with purpose and excitement rather than looking back or second-guessing my decision to take her at her word about needing space to find herself again. Within 10 days of Madison's public declaration of independence, I accepted a position as location scout with an indie film production company based in Atlanta, completely removing myself from Phoenix's art scene where we'd built our entire social circle and where she expected to continue running into me at gallery openings and photography exhibitions for years to come. The timing was absolutely perfect since I'd been freelancing for this company remotely for 8 months, and they'd been trying to convince me to relocate permanently to help them expand their southern location library for independent films and commercial shoots. Gabriella and I planned an epic cross-country road trip that would serve multiple purposes, combining my need to escape Phoenix with her passion for documenting forgotten American landscapes and abandoned architecture throughout the Southwest and Deep South. We spent 3 weeks driving through remote corners of Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia, stopping at ghost towns, defunct mining operations, abandoned cotton mills, and crumbling antebellum mansions that told the story of American industrial rise and decline through Gabriella's artistic lens while I scouted dozens of potential filming locations that would eventually land our production company's several major commercial contracts. Meanwhile, Madison launched what could only be described as a full-scale investigation into my whereabouts that bordered on stalking behavior, apparently convinced that my sudden disappearance was just another dramatic gesture designed to make her realize how much she needed me and come crawling back with apologies and promises to commit. She confronted my former co-workers at the advertising agency where I'd worked part-time, demanding information about my future plans and whether I'd mentioned anything about leaving Phoenix permanently, then showed up at my gym interrogating personal trainers about whether they'd seen me recently or knew where I might have gone. The desperation escalated when she tracked down my college roommate Marcus on LinkedIn, sending him a series of increasingly unhinged messages insisting there had been a massive miscommunication and that her Instagram post was just about needing temporary independence to work on herself, not an actual breakup or rejection of our relationship. She kept insisting to anyone who would listen that she just needed to explain the situation to me properly, that I'd misunderstood her intentions, and that we could work through this misunderstanding if someone would just help her get in touch with me to clarify what she really meant. My younger sister Emma, who'd never particularly liked Madison's self-centered personality and manipulative tendencies, finally had enough of the constant phone calls and firmly told Madison that if she genuinely needed space to find herself, she'd gotten exactly what she asked for, and that posting about relationship issues publicly before discussing them privately showed her true priorities and level of respect for what we'd supposedly built together. Emma pointed out that adults don't announce life-changing relationship decisions through social media captions with butterfly emojis, and that Madison's behavior since the post proved she'd never intended to actually break up but had expected me to fight for her attention and validation like I'd apparently done throughout our entire relationship whenever she manufactured drama to test my commitment level. In Atlanta, I threw myself completely into the Southern film community with an enthusiasm I hadn't felt in years, spending my days exploring Georgia's historic districts and documenting potential shooting locations while my evenings were filled with screenings at independent theaters and networking events where Gabriella and I quickly became known as the creative couple who could find the perfect abandoned mansion or crumbling industrial site for any production's aesthetic vision. My new life felt authentic in a way that my Phoenix existence never had, partly because I was finally working full-time in an industry I was passionate about instead of splitting my energy between a day job and freelance projects, but mostly because I was building something meaningful with someone who genuinely appreciated both my professional ambitions and my personality quirks without trying to change me into a different person. Gabriella and I developed a natural creative partnership that extended far beyond our personal relationship, spending weekends exploring rural Georgia towns where she'd photograph forgotten architecture while I documented locations that could serve as period-appropriate settings for everything from Civil War dramas to modern Southern Gothic films. And our combined portfolio quickly caught the attention of location managers from major studios looking to shoot outside the usual Los Angeles and New York corridors. Our relationship evolved organically through shared morning coffee rituals at a local roastery where we'd plan our weekend adventures, farmers market visits where Gabriella would photograph interesting produce arrangements while I chatted with vendors about regional history that might inspire future projects, and quiet evenings in her converted loft studio space discussing cinema theory and art history while she edited her latest architectural series and I reviewed location contracts for upcoming independent films. The contrast with my Madison relationship couldn't have been more stark, since every interaction with Gabriella felt like genuine collaboration between equals rather than the exhausting dynamic of constantly managing someone else's emotional needs and manufactured crises designed to test my devotion and attention. Meanwhile, Madison's Instagram became an increasingly desperate showcase of her amazing single life that fooled absolutely nobody who actually knew her personality and relationship patterns. Featuring expensive spa days in Sedona with hashtags about self-care and personal growth, VIP tables at Scottsdale nightclubs with captions about living authentically and refusing to settle for less than she deserved, and carefully staged photos with various men whose faces were strategically obscured but whose expensive watches and cars were prominently displayed to suggest she was dating successful professionals who appreciated her worth. Former mutual friends from the Phoenix art scene reported that Madison had become absolutely insufferable at social gatherings, monopolizing every conversation to simultaneously claim she'd escaped a toxic situation with someone who couldn't handle her independence while obsessively asking if anyone had heard any updates about my new life in Atlanta or whether I'd mentioned anything about missing Phoenix or regretting my hasty decision to leave everything behind for some woman I barely knew, who was probably just a rebound relationship that would crash and burn within months. 18 months after Madison's dramatic social media declaration, Gabriella and I had built something genuinely extraordinary together, both personally and professionally, with our collaborative photo series titled Forgotten America gaining serious attention from art galleries throughout the Southeast and leading to our first joint exhibition opening at a prestigious contemporary art space in Nashville. The series featured my location scouting discoveries paired with Gabriella's architectural photography expertise, creating a haunting visual narrative about American industrial decline and natural reclamation that art critics described as both historically significant and emotionally resonant. We announced our engagement through a simple, elegant Instagram post featuring our hands intertwined over vintage cameras with a caption about finding your creative partner and life partner in the same person, accompanied by photos from our gallery opening where we looked genuinely happy and professionally accomplished rather than performing happiness for social media validation. Madison discovered our engagement announcement within hours through a mutual friend's Instagram story repost, and her response was immediate, unhinged, and absolutely predictable based on her previous pattern of manufactured crises designed to regain attention and control. She created multiple fake Instagram accounts with variations of names like Concerned Friend and Truth Teller, leaving increasingly desperate comments on our engagement post about rebound relationships and people who move on too fast from real connections and authentic love that takes years to build. The comments started relatively subtle with congratulations followed by passive-aggressive observations about how some people rush into major life decisions when they're running from their true feelings, but quickly escalated to direct accusations about my supposed commitment issues and pattern of abandoning people when emotional intimacy becomes too challenging or demanding. Madison began systematically demanding Gabriella's professional photography accounts with cryptic messages warning her about my supposed inability to handle real relationships and tendency to disappear whenever women expected genuine emotional investment rather than surface-level companionship based on shared hobbies and mutual creative interests. The harassment campaign expanded to include contacting potential clients who had liked Gabriella's work, sending them anonymous messages suggesting they research her boyfriend's relationship history before hiring someone who might be emotionally unstable or unreliable for important photography projects requiring long-term commitment and professional consistency. The situation became serious enough that we had to involve a social media harassment lawyer when Madison started creating elaborate fake personas claiming to be former girlfriends warning people about my supposed pattern of love bombing followed by sudden abandonment, forcing us to document everything and consider legal action to protect both our personal privacy and Gabriella's professional reputation. Through our old Phoenix mutual friend network, we learned the disturbing truth about Madison's behavior since our breakup, Specifically that she'd systematically sabotaged 4 different promising relationships over the past 18 months, each time panicking and creating dramatic emergencies whenever men attempted to introduce her to their families or discuss future commitment plans like moving in together or meeting parents. Her pattern involved starting fights about independence and personal space whenever relationships progressed beyond casual dating, then desperately trying to reconcile when men took her at her word and began moving on, creating a cycle of manufactured drama that had earned her a reputation among Phoenix's dating scene as someone to avoid for anything serious or long-term. 3 years after Madison's NeedSpace Instagram post, Gabriella and I celebrated our wedding with an intimate ceremony in the Blue Ridge Mountains, surrounded by the tight-knit community of artist friends and film industry colleagues we'd built together in Atlanta who genuinely understood and appreciated our shared creative vision and partnership goals. The ceremony itself reflected everything we valued about authentic relationships, featuring personal vows we'd written about creative collaboration and mutual support, readings from our favorite photographers and filmmakers about finding artistic inspiration through love, and reception toasts that focused on our professional accomplishments as a team rather than generic relationship platitudes about compromise and sacrifice. Our honeymoon combined both our passions perfectly with a month-long photography expedition through Iceland, where Gabriella documented the dramatic Nordic landscape for a potential gallery series while I scouted filming locations for international productions that were increasingly interested in authentic remote settings rather than constructed studio environments. We spent our days hiking across volcanic terrain and photographing ice formations, our evenings reviewing the day's work in cozy guest houses while planning future collaborative projects that would blend our artistic perspectives into something neither of us could create independently. The trip represented everything our relationship had always been about: mutual respect for each other's creative vision combined with genuine excitement about building something meaningful together rather than performing happiness or competing for social media attention. Meanwhile, Madison made what could only be described as an impulsive life choice that perfectly illustrated how little she'd learned from our breakup, moving to Los Angeles with a cryptocurrency influencer named Trevor whom she'd met at a Phoenix networking event after dating for only 6 weeks and apparently panicking as she approached her 30th birthday while watching her former social circle pair off into serious marriages and family planning. Her Instagram stories during this period featured forced enthusiasm about manifesting abundance in her new West Coast lifestyle, upgrading her entire existence through positive thinking and strategic partnerships with successful entrepreneurs who understood her vision for personal brand development and lifestyle optimization. Friends back in Phoenix reported constant drama between Madison and Trevor over financial responsibilities, lifestyle compatibility differences, and most tellingly Madison's absolute refusal to delete dating apps or commit to lease agreements longer than 6 months, suggesting she was still hedging her bets and keeping her options open even while supposedly building a new life with someone she claimed was her perfect match for growth and success. The relationship appeared to follow Madison's established pattern of initial excitement followed by manufactured crises whenever real commitment became expected, with mutual friends reporting that Trevor had quickly grown frustrated with Madison's inability to make concrete plans or decisions about their shared future beyond vague Instagram captions about living authentically and deserving abundance. By the time Gabriella and I were exchanging rings in the mountains surrounded by people who genuinely cared about our happiness and success as individuals and as a creative partnership, Madison was apparently already creating problems in her Los Angeles situation by constantly comparing Trevor to previous relationships and questioning whether she was settling for someone who didn't meet her evolving standards for spiritual and financial compatibility in a serious long-term partnership. On our 4th wedding anniversary, Gabriella and I welcomed our son Oliver into the world and purchased a beautifully restored Victorian home in Atlanta's Grant Park neighborhood, complete with a converted carriage house that we transformed into Gabriella's professional photography studio where she could run client sessions and edit her gallery work while I managed my expanding location scouting business from a home office overlooking our garden. Our social media presence had evolved into something genuine and understated, featuring authentic family moments like Gabriella teaching Oliver to crawl among her carefully arranged camera equipment, candid shots from film festivals where we'd bring a portable crib and take turns attending screenings, and quiet Sunday evenings where we'd review contact sheets together while Oliver napped in his carrier between us. The life we'd built felt solid and purposeful in every way that my Phoenix existence never had, grounded in mutual respect and shared creative goals rather than constant drama and emotional manipulation designed to test commitment levels. Exactly 4 years to the day after Madison's dramatic needing space declaration, as Gabriella and I were simultaneously celebrating our anniversary and documenting Oliver's first tentative steps in our sunlit living room, my phone buzzed with an Instagram direct message that I almost deleted without reading based on the unfamiliar account name. The message was from Madison, writing under what was obviously a carefully crafted new username designed to sound mature and professional rather than desperate or attention-seeking, and the tone was completely different from her previous harassment campaigns, featuring what appeared to be genuine self-reflection and admission of fault rather than manipulation tactics or victim mentality. She confessed that her public space declaration 4 years earlier had been the most immature and destructive mistake of her entire life, that she'd spent years in therapy learning to recognize her patterns of manufactured drama and commitment phobia, and that watching my life unfold through mutual friends had taught her that independence and genuine partnership could coexist beautifully when both people were emotionally healthy and shared compatible life goals. The message continued with detailed acknowledgement of how poorly she'd handled our entire relationship and breakup, specifically admitting that her Instagram post had been a calculated manipulation designed to make me fight for her attention rather than an authentic expression of needing personal growth, and she begged for the opportunity to reconnect as evolved adults who could potentially build a mature friendship based on mutual respect and shared creative interests. I showed the message to Gabriella while she was editing photos of Oliver's first birthday party, and we shared one of those knowing looks that couples develop after years of genuine partnership, both recognizing the irony that Madison's desperate attempt to reconnect was arriving at the exact moment when our life together had reached peak contentment and stability. I blocked her final account without responding, then spent the evening watching Gabriella arrange prints of our family's journey across the studio walls, creating a visual timeline that showed Oliver's growth alongside our professional evolution as creative partners and parents. Standing there surrounded by evidence of the meaningful life we'd built together through mutual support and shared vision, I realized that Madison's public declaration of needing space 4 years earlier had been the greatest unexpected gift possible, clearing away the illusion of compatibility and opening the path for someone who genuinely wanted to build the same authentic, creative, family-centered life I'd always envisioned but had been too inexperienced to recognize I deserved.